I'm going to be giving you a sermon this morning. Bring this down a little bit. Sermon this morning that's going to be full of twists and turns, zigs and zags, rights and lefts. Just when you think you're headed towards Houston, you're going to be in Dallas. Yes, it's going to be like riding with my daughter when I was trying to teach her how to drive. We didn't know which way we were going, but somehow we were going to get there. And you thought I was going to start out down here, right? Well, I'm going to move up there. So, always have to have a prop of some sort, and that's my prop. So now I'm up here. You didn't think I was going to be up here, right? Had no clue that I was going to be up here at the top podium. But here I am. We're going to start off in 1 Corinthians 12. And mind you, this is just kind of a warm-up scripture. 1 Corinthians 12 through 27. For as the body is one and has many members, but all members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all been made to drink into that one Spirit. For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. If the foot shall say, because I am not the hand, I am not of the body, it is therefore not of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body, it is therefore not of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were a hearing, where would be the smelling? Now God has set all members, each of them, in the body just as he pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now, indeed, there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no members of the body, which seem to be weaker or necessary. And those members of the body, which we think to be less honorable, on these we bestow greater honor and compose the body, having given greater honor to that part which lacks it. That there should be no schism in the body, that all the members should have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now you are the body of Christ, and all members individually. And say, okay, what's the problem here? Well, the fact is, if you were to look at me and say my body, you'd probably say, well, it's kind of all of me here, right? My stomach, my legs are kind of mainly more though my torso though. But here, he doesn't even mention the middle part of us, right? He mentions the parts of us. He mentions the hands, the arms, the legs, the feet, the nose, the ears, all the different parts. Because Christ is the head, and he actually composes the physical thing that keeps us going, right? But the twist is that we're just the parts. We're the hands, the feet, and we all belong to this thing that we call the body. Okay, granted, that wasn't a great, wow moment, but it's kind of a different, it shows us how different God thinks. He thinks of us as these things out here that are helping to aid this thing that's here, instead of this thing that's here that's causing everything else to happen. We're going to look at mercy in Matthew 12, 1 through 14. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath, because you aren't supposed to work or do any effort on the Sabbath at all. And he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priest. So the showbread was something that the priest could eat, but not the common person. And yet David, because he was hungry, went in and ate it. And that was really against the law. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath, the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Because on the Sabbath, a lot of times they had to work and do sacrifices and do all their priestly duties, even though it was on a day that they weren't supposed to work. Yet I say to you that one is in this place, one is greater than the temple. But if you desire what this means, I deserve mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And when he had departed from there, he went to the synagogue, and behold, there was a man who had withered hand, and they asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? He kind of already gone through this somewhat, that they might accuse him. What man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Or how much more value is a man than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, stretch out your hand, and he stretched it out, and he restored as whole as the others. Now the Jewish leaders had a big problem with this because they were told that the Sabbath was holy, and it was holy. 14 times in the Old Testament, the Sabbath is holy, the Sabbath is holy, the Sabbath is holy. Don't work on the Sabbath, the Sabbath is holy. And Jesus comes along and upends that. He's saying, there's something greater than the Sabbath. The Sabbath is holy, but there's something greater than the Sabbath. I'm here. I'm greater than the Sabbath. Sabbath was holy, but mercy was holier. God's example towards the weak, all his things that he shouldn't have done, he did because he showed mercy to the Israelites all the time. And they kind of took advantage of it, and they didn't really realize, this was God's mercy in play. But he didn't have to do any of it, and yet he did. His mercy was holier than anything that they could possibly, think. All the problems that they did, all the errors that they made, his mercy was holier. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. That's something that we don't, in our life, we think, if you're going to be the first of the line, you're the first of the line. You're going to be the first in that movie, right? If you're, you didn't deserve to be up here. I spent all night to be first in the line for this movie. You don't deserve to be the first in this line. You need to go to the back. In Mark 10, 28, 31, Peter said to him, see, we have left all and followed you. So Jesus answered and said, assuredly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or mothers or mother or wife or children or lands for my sake and the gospel's who shall not receive 100-fold. Now in this time, houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecutions and in the age to come eternal life. But many are first who will be last and the last first. He's saying, there is you've left all this behind. You put yourself at risk. You may think of yourself as the lowest person because now you don't have any friends or family anymore. And yet, in the kingdom, you're actually the first person. You're weak. You're dejected. You've given up all for Christ. I'm going to put you first, even though you seem and you feel like you're the last person on the earth. Matthew 20, 1 through 16. For the kingdom of God, or kingdom of heaven, is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into the vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever it is right, I will give you. They went. Again, he went out about the 6th and 9th hour and did likewise. So he hired some people to work in the vineyard, and that wasn't enough to collect everything he needed from the vineyard, all the grapes and such. So he needed more people. So he goes out and at different times later in the afternoon into the evening and starts hiring more people. And says, go into the field and work, and I'm going to pay you. Again, he went out the 6th and 9th hour and did likewise. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing idle and said, why have you been standing here idle? They said to him, because no one's hired us. And he said, you go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, you will receive. Me, I would be negotiating price. What do you think is right? Just, $10 an hour, $15 an hour, does that sound about right? And yet these people had nothing, right? They were just standing out there idle. They had completely nothing. So it's always been a motto of mine, 20% of something is better than 100% of nothing. You want something, nothing is nothing. You want something. So when the evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. And when those who came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. But when the first came, they supposed they would receive even more money, and they likewise received each a denarius. And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, these men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, who has borne the burden and heated the day. But he answered one of them and said, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do with what I wish with my own things? Or is it your eye evil because I am good? So the last will be first and the first last, for many are called, but few are chosen. At this point in time, the labor union would step in and start saying, okay, you've defrauded all these people. We need to set standards. Make sure everybody's getting paid what they should be getting paid. And from a standpoint of me, I would have the same issue. I would be saying, it's kind of like, I've been working in the field all day. I should be getting more, right? And this person that hasn't worked as much, they should be getting less. In fact, I used to work at this place, and I would have the same problem with my coworker. It's kind of like, I'm working twice as hard as he is, and we're probably getting paid relatively the same amount, and it just didn't seem fair. And yet, when we realize that we're not in control of the money, not really, we're in control of giving ourselves, but we're not in control of the money. We have to realize that God is in control of the money, and it's not really money, it's grace. What God was giving out here was grace and mercy. He was giving out to people that didn't have anything. He was giving out to people that did, were working, a little bit harder, and some that weren't working at all. But it was his prerogative to give out the measure of grace that he wanted to. And he was giving his grace to everyone equally. They all got the same grace. And this shows the goodness and the greatness of God, is that he's not looking at us to say, okay, you deserve more grace and you don't deserve any grace. If you've come to me, you deserve grace equally. I'm going to give you the grace that you may not deserve, but I'm going to give you the grace that you need. In James 4, 6 through 10, he gives more grace. Therefore, he says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinner, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. In our society, to be number one is to be number one. You don't want to be number two. You don't want to be, anywhere on the bottom list if you, can help it. The person that gets all the glory and all the pride is the person that's up here at the very top. The kings and the leaders and, they got all the glory. You often don't hear about the person that's down here, but you hear a lot about anybody, you hear a lot about our president and those people that are way up here. And yet it's the person that is down here that is the needy person. He's the person that's humbling himself. He's the person that's, doesn't have anything. And he's the person that God is going to lift up. Not the person that's up here that doesn't need anything, but the person that's down here that does need something. Resist the proud. God will resist the proud, but gives grace to the humble. If you're humble, he will lift you up. That's kind of a twist in how we think of, from a society standpoint, because you want to be number one. But suffice it, God is happy when you're not number one. He's happy when you're the lowest person down here, so he can make you number one in his eyes. Let's turn to James 4, 11 through 12. This is another little section here. This is actually a continuation of what we're reading in James 4, 6 through 10. Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There's one lawgiver who is able to save and destroy. Who are you to judge another? And he's saying, you think you're so great, and because you think you're so great, you're judging all these people around you, right? And yet, you're not really the judge. You're not the lawgiver. You're not the judge. You're not the person that's going to decide what's going to happen to this other person over here. I am. God is. I kind of get preempted a little bit on the prodigal son. Because we're going to look at the prodigal son and the publican and the Pharisee real quick. Luke 18, 9 through 14. Also he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they are righteous and despised others. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, and even this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all that I possess. And the tax collector standing afar off would not even as much as raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. We've heard those terms again, right? If we think about the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, the setup is you have a father, you have two brothers. They each have an inheritance. The father is living in the house in safety. One of the sons decides, I don't like this lifestyle anymore. I want my inheritance. So the father gives him his inheritance. And he goes off and lives a lifestyle of debauchery, doing everything that he could and anything that he can, with the money that it was given him. And the other son stayed home with his father. And we're all thinking, good son, bad son here. But of course, when you run to the end of your money, you run to the end of your life. I've been in the situation where I I got a credit card, and it's kind of like, wow, I've got all this money on there. And I went out and spending and with my credit card, and then one day I realized, I don't have any more money. I'm deep in debt. I got to find some way out of this. And that's what the son who went and lived his life any way he wanted to did. He decided, I'm out here, I'm eating, with the pigs. I know one place that is safe. I know one place that even if I'm taken back as a servant, I'll be safe and I will be taken care of. So he goes back to his father. And his father says, son, welcome. I see you're dejected. You're repenting. You've turned, you want to turn your life around. And I'm here to welcome you with open arms. So he kills the fatted calf. He makes a big celebration for his son. And the other son is over here saying, there's something not right with this. I've been with my father all this time, and my brother, he's just lived his life however he wanted to, and he's come back and he's got a big celebration, and certainly I deserve more, and I should be getting the fatted calf, and he should be working with the servants, and he shouldn't have any of what the father's giving him. And of course, the father turns around and says to his son, son, you've had everything. You've had everything I've had, right? But he hasn't. He's wasted his life, which is what prodigal means. It means wasteful, excessive spending. He's wasted his life, but now he's come back. He knows that I'm going to take care of him. He knows that he can live a life that you're living because I'm willing to give it to him. I'm willing to show this mercy. And yet, even after hearing that, I still would kind of knowing myself, I would probably have a resentment. I'd be living with resentment towards my brother. That's kind of a human response. But I would have to get over it. I'd have to realize that everything is in the Father's hands. He's the one that's giving the mercy. He's the one that's giving, me a place to live. I mean, it's kind of amazing that the older brother, or the brother that stayed home, he cared about himself so much to stay home, but we don't have any indication that he went out looking for his brother or did anything to help his brother while he was out, wasting his life. He chose the safety of the Father's house. And that's what the other brother did as well. He came to his senses. And the relationship here of the Pharisee, the relationship of the brother that came back in prodigal living is a relationship of mercy. If we think about the publican and even the other brother who is the brother that lived with the father, he was basically a Pharisee as well. And they thought they had it all wrapped up. They thought, well, we know the law, we have the law, we are righteous, we are, doing everything we need to do to stay within the confines of where we need to be. And yet, just think about the relationship of the Pharisee when he was praying to God and how he humbled himself and pleaded with God to show mercy on him. Just think about the relationship of the brother that came back to his father. That's going to be a stronger bond than these other relationships because it's a relationship of love and need and mercy and grace and you can't struggle against a relationship like that. And it also shows that we can't think of ourselves as being righteous, self-righteous. We can do a lot of things to be lawful. And yet it always comes down to that relationship with God. That's what's always going to keep us. And that's what God is going to look at, is are we humbling ourselves as opposed to lifting ourselves up? Then we're going to look at Jesus. In John 18:36, he says, "My kingdom is not of this earth. If my kingdom was of this world, my servants would be out fighting, but my kingdom is not here." In Revelation 17:14, he's called Lord of Lords, Kings of Kings. So, Jesus is king. He is the crown, right? The king sits up on the throne, and he tells everybody what to do. He's got servants. He's got hundreds of servants. You tell them what to do. Those servants tell other servants what to do. And he doesn't really have to get his hands dirty whatsoever. But this isn't our king. Our king is different. Our king, the Jewish leaders, they thought, our king, we're going to put him up on a throne, and yet Jesus decided to zig when they thought he was going to zag. And he came to this earth, lowly born, raised by parents that didn't have any status. His father was a carpenter. Went around healing people that were the dregs of the earth. Spent very little time in the temple, which is where you think he should be. But instead, he's out with the dirt and the grime and the dust and with the commoners down here. And healing people, showing love, grace, and mercy, showing his power as God to those around him. And you think, with this much power, he should really be up here. And yet, he was down here. And there's a reason he was down here. In John 13:3-17, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, so just think, Jesus had all things. That's how much power he had. That's how much authority he had. Rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he is girded. This would be pretty perplexing if I was in the house and Joe Biden came in, or any of the presidents or any of their leaders came in and started saying, "Okay, sit down. I'm gonna wash your feet." It's kind of like, okay, I just don't understand this. This just doesn't make any sense. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said, "Lord, are you washing my feet?" And it's kind of like, Peter was perplexed. Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing, you do not understand now, but you will know after this." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." I'm not going to lower you to that extent. That's a servant's, job. Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." So Simon Peter, being Simon Peter, thought, man, if he's going to wash my feet, I might as well get more out of this, right? If this is what he wants to do, I can give him a lot more to wash. "Lord, not my feet also, but my hands and my head. Why stop at my feet?" Jesus said to him, "He who bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you." For he knew who would betray him, therefore he said, "You are not all clean." So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down, he said to them, "You know what I have done to you?" And here he's going to explain it to them. "You call me teacher and Lord, may have even called me king, and you will see me as king one day. And you say, well, for so I am. If then your Lord and teacher have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who sent greater than who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. And he's saying, if you think I'm your master, and I am, what I am telling you to do is what a master does. This is truly what a king is supposed to be, a servant to the people. You won't find a king to be being much of a servant of the people. He has servants. But Jesus is showing what it's like to be a true, humble servant, even though he is a true, glorious king. The Jews didn't expect it. They didn't even want it. They wanted him to create this kingdom that they could live with on earth. And yet he was creating and building this kingdom that would last forever, that no moth or rust could destroy. And we're going to quickly go back to mercy over sacrifice. I desire mercy over sacrifice. Jesus sacrificed himself. He died and went to the cross for us. And yet, unlike all those other sacrifices that couldn't result in really anything, the sacrifices, the bulls and the goats and the sheep, Jesus' sacrifice could result in something that's long-lasting, something that's, it's incredible. And yet, it wasn't just about sacrifice, because remember, mercy is greater than sacrifice. When Jesus died, he wasn't showing sacrifice of anything but himself. He was showing sacrifice of himself. He was showing mercy through his sacrifice towards all those people around him. And he wasn't even worthy of the sacrifice, of his going to the cross. And yet he did anyway, because through this, we would get the mercy that we don't deserve, but that we need. And we all need this. We all need to realize that, the things that we think about on a daily basis in our lives, they aren't quite what God is thinking about. He's thinking about us on a higher plane. If we think we should be doing one thing, God wants us to do something else. It's good to do, things, that we should be doing. It's good to be doing things that we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be doing sinful things. We should be sacrificing ourselves to God and to others. And yet, if we don't have that relationship with God, we're totally missing out on everything. And we always have the chance to have a relationship with God, whether now, whether later, because just like the Father at the house, he's always there. He's always ready to welcome. He's always waiting to accept. It's just a matter of where do we think we are. If we think we're up here, then we don't need God. If we know we're down here, then we really do. And we always need God. I will praise you.